peak.
The latest data show another rise in COVID.
Hello and welcome to In the News Right Now.
On the show this week, we're joined by Off Guardian editor Kit Knightley,
Peter McIlvenna from the Heart of Oak podcast, and journalist and podcaster James Delingpole will be wading in on this week's stories.
The biggest story of this week is probably the Ukrainians blaming the Russians for the sabotage of the Nord Stream pipeline.
Mosquitoes used to vaccinate participants in clinical trial.
Facebook's metaverse could be overrun with deepfakes.
And straight out of the You'll Own Nothing and Be Happy playbook, UK retailer John Lewis has set up a clothing rental service.
So plenty to get into. Let's start with you, Kit. What are your thoughts on the apparent bombing of the Nord Stream pipeline?
Well, that's an interesting question. It's a difficult question. I mean, right off the bat, you say it's just going on along with what's been going on so far. It's a continuation of the Great Reset, really, by other means. Like Klaus von Clausewitz or something said that war is a continuation of policy by other means, and you can sort of say that the Ukraine war is a continuation of the Great Reset policy by other means, and that extends to deliberate sabotage of the economy in general, as well as specifically the price of energy. So in that context, you can see that destroying Nord Stream 2 will continue, where people will freeze, people will starve. So rather than even suggesting who's to blame, really, we should be wondering about why now and why, like, what the end game will be and how many people exactly are going to suffer because of this.
That's true, and also that I think because people look at things disconnected, like kind of like the COVID stuff from Ukraine, but actually the two things are connected in the sense that, like you say, it's the continuation of, lockdowns will destroy the economy. This is going to destroy the economy at the same time. And
also I've noticed as well, I've seen that they're saying that this could be the time to start with renewables. So that's convenient for the whole Green New Deal, net zero agenda that they're trying to push. James Delingpole, what do you think? What do you make of it all?
I gather they found a Russian passport floating directly above the spot, so the finger seems to be pointing at Putin, who is actually the most evil. Are you aware of this? He's actually the new Hitler. He's the most evil man in the world, and we've got to go to war with him. I like Kit's super subtle answer that it's of course unclear to us down the rabbit hole exactly who are the goodies and who are the baddies in this. I personally suspect that this was an operation carried out on behalf of NATO. I don't see any reason why Putin would sabotage his own gas pipe, which A, he would have been able to profit by, and B, used as a kind of way of holding Europe to ransom. Well, he can't do that anymore. He's got his bargaining chip has been taken away. So I think it was almost certainly done on behalf of NATO, probably by Biden. And it's not as though we don't have footage of Biden saying that this was what he was going to do, I believe, in February. But the bigger picture is this. As Martin Armstrong of Armstrong Economics and others have said, war over the Ukraine is looking inevitable. And this has long been the desire of the deep state, and beyond that, the architects of the Great Reset. So I think the only way we're going to avoid this, and I'm not even sure that's possible, is to wake people up to that the whole thing is a psyop. But even people who were aware of even people who are awake on the subject of the death jabs, as I call them, so many of them seem to be asleep on the subject of Ukraine. I mean, I drive through villages around me, and there are still these blue and yellow flags fluttering. I mean, these people couldn't have placed Ukraine on a map, probably still can't. 2 years ago, they'd never heard of Zelensky. They've got no skin in the game, and yet they're all rooting for him. Look at all the social media manipulation that I think Thinking Slow on Twitter has suggested that at least 80% of the traffic on Twitter is bots, and the bots are mainly working to promote the narrative that Ukraine is this sovereign state, apparently, and its integrity has been violated by this completely unasked for, undeserved invasion, etc., etc. And most of the morons out there actually believe this crap.
So you know what? When this first happened and Russia invaded, I said, I can't believe that people aren't trying to de-escalate the situation. I can't believe people aren't out there trying to get diplomats and negotiations going on. I was called a Russian sympathizer, a Putin apologist, just simply saying, why are we immediately escalating to sanctions? Why are we immediately escalating to sending money and weapons? And you couldn't have any nuance. So, Peter, what similarities have you seen with this? With the way they were kind of had this propaganda agenda with COVID?
Oh, it's massively become an information war completely. And I certainly look at it and think, who has to gain from this? Putin doesn't have anything to gain from it because they're losing money, as James pointed out. Actually, Norway have a lot to gain. I was in Poland last week and a new pipeline has just opened between Norway into Germany and Poland. So that obviously boost that. Germany are less and less reliant on Nord Stream pipelines from Russia. I think it's down from 50 to about 25%. But this is how one way Putin finances the war effort. So he can simply turn off the tap. So it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't benefit him. In fact, it brings an avalanche of more criticism and more weapons from the West against Putin. So there is no way that this act benefits Putin at all. It benefits other countries, certainly the USA with their gas shipment into Europe, which is already ramping up. It boosts Norway. And so it can't be Putin. It doesn't make any sense. But we are in the middle of a misinformation war.
See, I kind of felt, much like you were saying, the sense that no one's ever spoke about peace. That's just never been, they've even paid lip service to it. And I think of stuff like, Israel, Palestine, France, for instance, they will have these kind of accords and these things, and it's all a load of nonsense. But they will at least pretend to be trying to talk about peace. Whereas with Ukraine and Russia, they never even bothered considering it. And I think when I saw the Nord Stream sabotage, I thought, well, actually, that's Putin's bargaining chip. But it's also a way for peace, because actually, if parts of Europe become so desperate in the winter that actually, okay, look, you can recognise these areas that we're annexing, and then you can have your energy back. And there might be a little bit. Now that's gone completely.
Totally gone, hasn't it?
Totally gone. Yeah, it feels a little bit like that. Is that something that you think, Kit, that could potentially be a reason?
Well, yeah, it's potentially a reason. I think really overall what you're looking at is, as you say, there was no call for peace because it was important to maintain a war footing. They had a war footing during COVID. People were stopping being so afraid of COVID. They needed a new reason to keep a war footing. So obviously they can't open that up by saying, but maybe we'll just have peace. So no, the war is important. And as people get bored, as people sort of disengage with the headlines, yes, they're still bombing Ukraine. Yes, we'll still put our flags on. They need to escalate. They need to create new plot points. They need to make people feel the threat more in order to justify not pursuing peace. And now Putin can say to his people in Russia, he can say, they've destroyed our pipeline, they've ruined our economy. And that will increase anti-NATO feeling in Russia. And people in NATO can say, Russia have destroyed our pipeline, they're trying to freeze us to death. It's widening the division, preventing any people going to the negotiating table and trying to create animosity on both sides, which is vital for continuing a war threat, just like they did in World War I. They kept up the anti-German talk constantly for years to justify sending people over there to die.
James, you mentioned that, how a lot of people that saw the COVID narrative can't see what's going on here. And away from Nord Stream a bit, if you talk about the kind of propaganda, we saw the people dropping down in China, and then all of a sudden we saw, they even said there was video game footage used right at the start. Then they had, the propaganda with Snake Island where the Russians had killed all these soldiers, and actually they hadn't. The soldiers had surrendered. So we saw this really emotional stuff at the start that got people to say, let's go fight Ukraine. None of which was true. Why do you think people, that can see the COVID narrative are really not seeing what's going on here with the Russia and Ukraine situation.
But there's the meme about this, isn't there? That the newspapers were completely lying to me about COVID, but I believe everything they say about Russia. It's extraordinary. I think a lot of I was the same for most of my life. I read the paper every day. I thought that's what a sort of civilized, educated person did. You informed yourself by reading the news. And I was unaware for those 50 or so years of my first part of my life that what I was actually being fed was propaganda. Most people still have not had that mental breakthrough. They still believe that okay, the BBC may be a bit dodgy at times, but generally its heart's in the right place, and that these correspondents with their they're out there and they're reporting on it. Same with the foreign correspondents reporting for the newspapers, and they trust what they say. So when they read in the papers, for example, about the Bucha massacre, which is allegedly being carried out by Russians on innocent Ukrainians, they believe it, and they never read the follow-up stories on the internet by more honest journalists reporting that actually no, this was another false flag staged by the Nazis, of which Ukraine is rife, and that this was carried out against innocent civilians in order to discredit the Russians. So much of what we're being fed on the Ukraine is propaganda, and people believe the propaganda, and that's the problem. I don't know how we get around that.
Peter, what do you think in terms of someone who works, particularly say at the BBC, where 5 years ago they were having documentaries about how there were Nazis in Ukraine. Ross Kemp, I think, was out there. I'm trying to remember the name of that particular show.
Extreme World.
Extreme Worlds, yeah. And so they're there. They're on foot. They're saying things. For instance, that their reason for being is a war with Russia. That's the end game. That's the goal of them. So then, the BBC, then all of a sudden it's a conspiracy theory that there's Nazis in Ukraine. How do you think they do that as a journalist? Because for me, I've probably not got the greatest memory, but I'm getting on now. But I could still think, well, actually, hang on, I worked on a documentary 5 years ago, and now I'm saying what I filmed then isn't real. Doesn't make sense.
I think it's fear, and we've seen over so-called COVID how fear has been used to force people to adopt a position, and people will. I talk to so many people who they say we hate the Conservative government, we hate Matt Hancock, we don't listen to anything they say, but we'll go along and get as many jabs of some substance as many times as they tell us, and they haven't connected that. I hate someone, I'll not do anything they say, to now I'll do everything they tell me to do, and that's changed over a period of months because of fear and because of convenience. Why have journalists by and large adopted it? Obviously, it's the editors that have adopted it. A journalist in a newspaper doesn't get to say what they think. It's all up to the editor to decide what goes in and what goes out. So all those editors have been bought up somehow, whether that's either because of advertising, because COVID. Some newspapers only exist because of the amount of advertising on COVID they were receiving, or whether it's something else, whether it's blackmail behind the scenes. But you're right, something is enforcing the government's line to push an agenda. Was COVID, now it's Russia, I'll be on something else. But it's the fear of Russia going to nuke us all. That's really scary. So everyone goes, I don't want to have a nuclear missile land in my house. So I agree, I'll do whatever they say. And just that fear, first of all, it was the unknown virus. Now it's a nuke hitting you. No one likes a nuclear bomb. So we'll go along with what the government say they know best.
It feels like the whole COVID narrative is coming back as well here in the UK, at least. They're trying to push it, but I think they're going to struggle. I had this conversation with my dad yesterday, and he said to me, do you think they'll get away with it again? I'm like, well, I don't see how, because even, so-called normies that went out and they got 3 maybe jabs or whatever, they're kind of, no, I'm done now. Like I did everything I was asked, it's the end. And where we were yesterday, we had a family day out, and I overheard, I was trunking these couple talking, and they were talking about the fella's dad. You know, he's just going to get his booster and all that sort of stuff, but we don't talk about it anymore because they've got different opinions. And what they were saying is they did the first two, they followed in line, you know, and then they were like, nah, that's enough. So I think maybe, you know, they might struggle to get away with it. And so to kind of try and tie that into the next story, if I want you to get vaccinated, and I put all this pressure and all this money, this huge amount of money that went into this advertising campaign, guilting, you got James Corden dancing around like a prat and all that sort of nonsense. And still millions and millions and millions of people stuck the middle finger up and went, I don't want it. What better way than to just create a load of mosquitoes and just chuck them out into the wild and have them jab people against their will? What do you say to that, Kit? That sounds like a great idea.
Oh, that's been the golden goose since they started this way back in 2020. They've been talking about contagious vaccines and vaccines in the water supply, and they want everybody to take the vaccine, but they don't want to be so barefaced as to basically shove a gun in your face and force you to. So they're coming up with like passive aggressive mandates, like vaccines you simply can't avoid. If they can figure out a way to do that, they would love it. And of course, once they have the technology to do it, they can do it with all sorts of things. And they would just simply never tell us.
Well, I'm pretty sure they did it with Zika, didn't they? They released mosquitoes with Zika in South America. That's right, isn't it, James?
Yeah, and before that, Gareth, I talked to a fascinating woman the other day, a naturopath called Dr. Ariana Love on my most recent podcast, and she was saying that they have been weaponizing insects for many years. I mean, I'm a victim of that myself. You know, Lyme disease is actually was weaponized in a lab on an island in not far from Connecticut, from Lyme, after which the disease is named. They've been experiment, I think, in the Ukrainian biolabs, which have been run on behalf of the CIA. They've been weaponizing insects for use against the Russians and against us, presumably. The so-called vaccines, long before these experimental mRNA therapies, the people responsible for this horror have been putting all manner of stuff in injections. You know, this is long before COVID. You know, when you went in for your routine jabs, it contained all manner of stuff besides the stuff it was supposed to contain. So all they're doing now with these stories about, look at these mosquitoes, and isn't it clever the way they're injecting people? They're just revealing the method, but this has been happening for decades.
It's terrifying to me.
It's so terrifying.
It's bizarre. I mean, because for me, like, my attitude towards any jab, to be fair, but particularly the COVID one, was like, it's not happening, and this is my line. And if it means I can't go on holiday to New York and watch the Rangers or whatever, then I don't do that. Yeah. That's fine. Like, that's my decision. Whereas if all of a sudden, you know, buzzing around outside my house, you've got this, then, you know, where'd you go from there?
And there's no informed consent. No. And then some people could be more susceptible to getting bitten than other people, so that they have, like, you know, 5 times the amount of the toxin in them that someone who's not really going to get bitten has. And then, as they said, like, this could be then used for any disease, and is it even a vaccine? Is it just the pure disease they're putting in? You know, Peter, what do you think about it all?
Oh, lots of questions. So, but one is, they don't actually need to do this. Fear has worked. Fear has forced people into accepting whatever they are told to be. I've talked to so many doctor friends. They were going to get their jab, and I said, which one are you getting? They said, don't know, whatever one they have. These are doctors who understand the medical profession, and they will stick out their arm and get injected with anything. They don't even need to know. So fear has worked. And also, when this story came out recently, I look back, and you look back 12, 15 years ago, it was the similar stories coming out. It, of course, makes sense to the public. If there is a threat, then why not protect everyone against the threat? All sounds wonderful. But my other question is, why are we being told this? Why is this information being put out? Someone is deciding to release this information. This could be happening anyway. We would never know. And until there's a leak of information coming out to inform the public, a lot of things happen. We have no idea they're happening. So why are we being informed about this trial now, especially when there have been trials going back 12, 15 years? That's what I'm trying to work out in my head. What lies behind that information being made known to the public?
That's an interesting point. I wonder if it's to dishearten the resistance. Do you know what I mean? Because I'm just thinking about it. Like I felt a little bit like that. Oh, for goodness' sake! Maybe that is part of it. We're trying to. I feel like they've been trying to knock us down for over 2 years. Mentally.
Oh, they want to sell a lot of mosquito repellent.
Well, yeah, that's true. Yeah, we should get shares in that. Yeah, definitely. In terms of the metaverse, which obviously next to it, I don't know much about the metaverse. I confess, it's not something I'm particularly metaversed on.
No, and I don't ever want to go into the metaverse, so I've stayed well out of the metaverse. But it's about, I think, these deep fakes as well. And I know Bruce Willis has sold his deep fake version or something to, is it Deep Cake? A company that makes these deep fakes, and then I was freaked myself out. I went on to TikTok because I saw an article, and then it led me onto TikTok, and I saw a Tom Cruise deep fake that looks so like Tom Cruise, and I went through all his TikToks. I'm like, this is absolutely terrifying. If there could be something that's so easily made that you could shove it on TikTok every week, that's your complete likeness, sounds like you. What are the implications of that?
Oh yeah, well that's a good point actually, because then you get to a point where what is real? I can watch a video of someone committing a murder, but did they?
Yeah.
That's the thing, isn't it? That's the thing. What do you think, Kit, in terms of that? I don't know if you know much about the metaverse, but
I know nothing about the metaverse. I do know you just stole what I was going to say. That's exactly what I was going to say. That's exactly right. We're in a situation now, and it's difficult to adjust to because as people, we're sort of programmed to believe that if we see something, it must be real. We believe our eyes. It's an old expression, you believe your eyes. But we're not really living in that world anymore. Now, as you say, you could see a video of somebody doing something and it could never have happened. The whole thing could never have happened. There are just apps on the internet that will, using AI, generate a person, a face. That it's not based. It scans hundreds and hundreds of photos and creates a perfectly realistic looking face of a person that never existed. So you can do that, and you combine that with deepfake technology to put this face on some body, some computer animated body even, and suddenly you have a totally fake person walking and moving around. There's another interesting wrinkle to it though, because there's also this weird push at the moment. Elon Musk, when he was going to buy Twitter, revealed that 80% of Twitter traffic is fake people. Wow. So there is this push to encourage people to dismiss what they see online as fake, to dismiss people as bots. Like this goes back years. After the Salisbury poisonings, the Skripal thing, people were tweeting about that. Definitely real people that I have talked to in real life were like dismissed as Russian bots who never existed. These are fake people. Don't listen to them. They're not even real people. So there is that campaign. Like it's like a two-pronged thing. Yeah. A, there's the technology out there to fake people, and B, there's the reason out there to dismiss dissent and alternative opinion as not real.
It's interesting because Gabe just said in my ear, the producer Gabe, about the fact that one of the initiatives involved with revealing these deep fakes and these bots is actually headed up by Mariana Spring, who's been the absolute misinformation expert during COVID, fact-checking people that have actually now been proved to be completely correct about what was coming and particularly what the jabs were going to do to people. James, do you know much about the metaverse? For me, it almost seems like a matrix within a matrix, basically.
What I can say which is good about the metaverse is apparently it's a good money-making opportunity if you want to buy the crypto, which is particularly dedicated to that kind of thing. I've made some money out of it, but apart from that, it's all really bad. Isn't there a BBC drama series at the moment about sort of deep fakes, about somebody being accused of? I haven't seen it because it's on the BBC, and I tend to, I feel polluted after I've watched it. But apparently it's quite good. But I think that illustrates the point that I wanted to make also about the why are they telling us now about the mosquitoes, and you must know this, Gareth. You must have heard this from your dad. The revelation of the method is very important to these people because they have a weird sense of honor to do with karma, as in Karma, rather than feeling all calm after a cup of tea. It matters to them because they are doing terrible things to us, and they're all, as you know, Satanists at the highest level. They're all serving the dark, evil one, and they have a moral code. I mean, warped though it may seem to us, because they do terrible things in every other aspects of their lives. But they believe that if they tell us what they're going to do before they do it, it exonerates them. And you see this, they give clues before their false flag operations. They do it before things like the release of these mosquitoes, which they've been doing for ages. But you know, they feel that somehow it relieves them of the moral burden, because they told us what they were going to do, and we didn't do anything about it, so we sort of kind of deserve it. We've got it coming to us, and they're fine because they told us what they were going to do.
Yeah, silence is consent. Then basically, that's the sort of attitude, isn't it? If I tell you I'm going to do something, it feels almost, I suppose, the same as when people put up planning permission things on lampposts. No one ever reads them,
no,
ever. But then they can go and build a multi-storey car park across your house because they told you, didn't they? But you're absolutely right, James. I kind of think with that whole COVID was exactly the same. They told us everything. You know, when you were revealing things that were sort of smashing the narrative to bits, they were all bits that you'd been told by them anyway, you know, whether it be the PCR test with the number of cycles at 45 and all this kind of stuff. That was on NHS documents. They told you what they were doing. And it's always felt to me like the vampire. Like, the vampire can come in and tear my face off, but I've got to welcome them in. I have to let them. It almost feels like it's the same kind of code, isn't it? That was to you, James.
Oh, sorry. No, absolutely no, Gareth. I often say this, actually. This is one of my obsessions. You know, the literature has all these clues within it, which help us understand. You know, there is deep knowledge embedded in literature. So Bram Stoker, I don't know. A lot of people who make it in literature and movies or whatever are actually part of they are sort of attached to the powers that be, so they understand how they work. I mean, look at Harry Potter, for example. Harry Potter would never have been as successful as it has been without the permission of the powers that be, the cabal, the predator class, whatever you want to call them. They wanted this stuff out there because they wanted kids feeling really comfortable with black magic and kind of loving it and stuff, and getting, you know, normalizing it. And so again, Bram Stoker, when he wrote Vampires and described this rule that Dracula has, that he can't come into your house unless you ask him in. They know this stuff. This is just a literary version of a phenomenon widespread throughout the evil world of the cabal, that they have to do this stuff with your notional permission, and somehow they are then absolved of their terrible crimes. Yeah. It's sick, but it's how it's the rules of the game.
Yeah, but it's a weakness for them as well, I think, because obviously, you know, we can see these things coming, which, you know, hopefully then, as James said, you know, you can then alert people and let people know what's coming, and hope that that's going to, you know, wake some people
and
up.
Hope.
Lots of hope. Yeah. I've realised I should specify names as well.
Yeah.
I'll just ask a question. It's like the first one to answer.
They're all very polite today. Very polite. No jumping in.
No. So
can I say that with where we are at the moment, I sat in a lecture in June about the metaverse, and it is frightening the control the companies could have. And this is all about control. This is all about monitoring, and deepfake is all about misinformation. So it's moving that control from the real world, where there's so many issues that make it difficult, where we go into the whole thing of CCTV and how that's used. But actually, this is now in a controlled environment. This is in a computer environment. This is where whoever creates it is in control. So if Facebook are creating it, then they are in control. And I think that James talked about the finance side of it. I think I read the value of this is expected to be 5 trillion by the end of the decade, and I'm sure that will go up further. So there's massive value that is encouraging companies to invest in this. But deepfake is all about control, and if we can be controlled in a computer program, then that is a dystopian world to the extreme.
I wonder if the selling point to some people is like, it starts off with people living their life through Instagram or whatever, just escaping, taking 42 efforts to take that selfie and then putting the filter on it and putting that's me to the world, when actually that's not you at all. It's taken you 42 attempts or whatever. The metaverse is just another extension onto that. It's like, I don't like my life, I don't like the real world, so I'm actually going to live in this this fake reality.
Well, this is the thing, and I think it kind of relates to the next story as well, is that you can buy things like fake virtual clothes to dress yourself and designer goods and artwork that's not even real. It's just in the metaverse. And I suppose it relates a little bit to the John Lewis story, that now they're going to, you can rent clothes, which I know they've rented out tuxedos and stuff like that for, a long period of time. We've always done that. But, to rent a handbag for £130, to rent a Balenciaga handbag, that comes from a whole load of materialism. And let's put on this show for a couple of days that I've got some expensive thing. And is that even important? Kit, what do you think about, this own nothing and be happy, let's rent everything, let's buy fake, non-existent things on the metaverse? What do you make of it all?
Well, to connect it back to the metaverse, basically you can sort of sum up an awful lot of the movement in general as inserting a corporate interest between you and the real world. So in a banking situation, instead of paying with cash, which they're trying to stop that happening, the bank is now between you and the thing you want to buy. And in the metaverse, Facebook will then be between you and the people you want to interact with. It's about putting things in the middle of your interactions. And in renting, basically, they're putting a corporate business between you and the things you used to own. It's about separating you from the real world entirely, and indeed creating, like you talked about with Instagram and the whole idea of fake clothes and fake art. It's about almost creating a real matrix, in a more grounded in reality and less sweeping and fictional. But that kind of attitude that separates people from each other and makes all interactions through corporate interests.
I wonder as well, in terms of censorship, if everything moves towards the metaverse, so people are interacting and that's where they're living their lives. If you're an undesirable, like all of us, then you can essentially be banned from the metaverse. You'd be banned from the world, basically. Is that something, James, that is or am I just going way over the top there?
Well, everyone else is on their virtual reality world, sort of consuming sort of bizarre porn and stuff. We can be out there going for walks with our dog and surfing and enjoying the real world, because everyone's going to be indoors. I don't know. I tell you what I did notice about this story is that a lot of people say, right, let's call them normies for want of a better word. A lot of people say, yeah, but there's no way that all this stuff could be planned. Look, I believe in cock up, not conspiracy. There's no way that a small number of people at the top could control us in this way. But they don't understand how it works. What you have is organizations like the World Economic Forum and the higher up body, the Trilateral Commission, which really controls most of the world, and the Committee of 300. All the let's be nice and call them think tanks. They're these shadowy organizations. They set out the agenda decades in advance at conferences like the ones in Davos. So they say, the new thing is going to be you rent your clothes rather than you buy them. And then this gets adopted by the system. It gets filtered through the entertainment industry, through the BBC dramas like the one I just mentioned, by useful idiots like John Lewis. there seems to be an appetite for people further down the chain to look, oh, there's an idea that I've been ordered to adopt. I think I might roll it out now. That's how it works. It all filters down from the top, from this very, very tiny predator class, which hates us, which wants to destroy us. We are useless eaters to them. They despise us. They're well on the way to making us into their digital slaves. And there's John Lewis just only obeying orders. And then you'll get a story in the Mail like, oh, isn't this ticklish? People won't own their own clothes anymore. It sounds novel and exciting and fun, and this is what you want to do and enjoy, Daily Mail readers.
And then do you think, Peter, that they use these WEF agendas to push it? So, for example, this whole thing that John Lewis is doing is for sustainability, right? So it's for sustainability, to help the cost of living crisis. They're going to rent out a handbag for 130 quid. Like, where is the logic in
That'll
people?
Save it. That'll save it.
Right? You're just throwing away money. Where is the real sustainability, and why are people? How are people being manipulated to believe this?
It's not about sustainability, it's about control. And we've had this. You could go and you can lease a car, you can rent a car for 1, 2, 3 years, hand it back, then pick another car. So you can do the same with your phone. I mean, the whole rent lease economy is big business. And I guess this moves over just to something else. My big concern is, we're up to now, you could go to many places, getting smaller number, with your paper, your cash in your wallet, and you could hand over notes and coins, and you could actually purchase something as completely anonymous. This connects you. If you are doing this, obviously you will need to use a card, so they know they'll need to take all your details. And actually it may be easier for them to just put a little tracker in as well, so you don't go anywhere that's bad. So when you come back, they can track where you've been, and they can make sure that you haven't been any rough part of town that it might get damaged. I think that's where this is moving, to that whole CCP system of control, and that you move away from normal currency, from pounds and pence where you buy it, to actually they will need to know who you are, where you've been, and whether you're looking after it.
It is amazing, isn't it? Actually, when you were talking about how things are completely unrelated, it just made me think of Biden saying, where it's hurricane season, the best thing to do is get vaccinated. I'm still trying to work out how on earth those two things were put together. But like, as James was saying, obviously, that this is a long-term plan, that goes on over decades. And I wonder now, because they normalise certain things, so then actually further down the line, you're far more malleable for what they want to give you. Yeah. And it just made me think, when you were talking about the fact that we'd be out sort of in the countryside walking our dogs and whatever, while everyone else is in the metaverse, I'd remember when I first moved away from the Isle of Wight, and there's this, as you come into the old town I lived in, there's these playing fields, and they're always full of kids. Like, you used to turn up on your own and just join a game. And you'd have like 34 aside, game of football or something, jumpers for goalposts, and that sort of thing. And I remember moving up to Derby for a few years, and I went back to visit, and I drove past it, and I looked, and it was like a Saturday afternoon, and there wasn't a single person. The park was just empty. And I was just, it kind of blew my mind, really. And I remember talking to my brother-in-law at the time about it, and he was saying, well, people are they're still playing football, they're just on the Xboxes. That's the difference. And it's kind of, that seems like an early stage of the metaverse. It was getting people off the park and into their own houses with the headphones on, so you're doing that. And I'm wondering then, what the next step is in terms of, I'll ask this to you, Kit, what you think from, we can rent a handbag for 130 quid, was it?
Yeah. By the way, I would rather spend 20 quid on a handbag and own it. And well, actually, I do that when I go to London, because I don't want to get mugged. So this whole thing of let's rent a handbag for show, shove it on my Instagram for, as though I'm this wealthy person. Like, where does this need come from for people to do that?
Very strange. But what do you think will come next, Kit? It will be a point of case, like, you can't afford your house because we've destroyed the economy, so we'll have it off you, but you can rent it, but you just won't own it.
That's an interesting question. I'm gonna ignore it for a minute and loop back around to something James said before about Daily Mail and like look, these people are renting their clothes now. The important part of that is that not 2 years at least, but really 20, 30, they've been progressively making everybody poorer. And the thing about renting and eating bugs and stuff is it's trying to take what you have to do out of desperation and make it cool. Like, you're not eating bugs because you can't afford to buy meat. You're eating bugs because you're concerned about the planet, and it's trendy and it's fun and it's new and it's exciting. You're not renting a tiny flat because you can't afford to pay the mortgage on your house anymore. You're renting a tiny flat because it's easier to heat and it's better for the environment. You're not renting your clothes because you can't afford nice clothes. You're renting your clothes because you're just concerned about polar bears and stuff. They're trying to make do you remember? I'm not sure. A couple of years ago, there was all these programs I think about tiny houses.
I've seen there's
like
quite a few on
people
Netflix.
Converting minivans and buses and like just estate cars into this is my tiny house. There was a movie about it, won Best Picture a couple of years ago, Nomadland, about a woman who does that. And that is another example. Like, you're going to live in a van, but don't worry, living in a van isn't a sign that you're desperately poor in this completely crushed economy. It's a sign that you're a rebel. That's the next stage, is to basically make poverty cool. And so people will do it by choice.
It's an interesting thought.
Really
I hadn't
interesting
even thought about that. No, but it wouldn't surprise me at all. I'm at a point now where literally I don't believe anything I'm told is being told to me for the reasons I'm being told.
No, me neither. Absolutely not.
No, that's it. But thank you so much for joining us, by the way, guys, because I think we're out of time now, which is crazy because we've been chatting away. But it's been great. But thank you so much to Kit, Peter, and James for joining us. Really appreciate your time.
Thanks to you all at home, and if there's anything you want to add to it, just pop it in the comments below. Good night.
Absolutely.